Today, my interview is with Jehiel Oliver, the CEO for Elo Tractor. Elo Tractor provides technology services to tractor owners to better manage their equipment while providing farmers and agents an app to request services from technology-enabled tractor fleets. Today, we'll be discussing how COVID-19 is affecting your business. Hi, Jehiel. How are you doing? Thanks for joining us today.
Pleasure to be here.
How's the lockdown in Nairobi?
We've been at it for a little over a month now. We closed our offices 6 weeks ago. So we're getting through it. I'm bored. I've exhausted the Netflix catalog, but.
Okay. Well, everybody's going through that. But I just wanted to talk to you about how COVID-19 is impacting your business and what are the things you've had to go through. So I'll just ask you a couple of questions and get right into it. Good?
Okay. Sounds good.
So as one of the biggest agricultural mechanization service companies on the continent, how has the pandemic affected Elo Tractor directly? And what changes have you had to take internally to ensure a sustainable operation despite the lockdown?
Yeah. Well, COVID-19 has placed a significant amount of downward pressure on the broader global economy. That is absolutely clear. And generally, in any economic downturn, agriculture gets hit the hardest. Agriculture in the emerging markets, small farmers get hit extremely hard, and these are our customers. So we've seen a tremendous amount of downward pressure on our business. Proactively responding to that has meant asking our employees to take salary cuts, senior leadership not taking a salary at all. We actually agreed to do that about a month and a half ago, just to get in front of this crisis, protect our cash flow so we can continue our work, because the work in providing tractors to farmers is more important now than ever before. And we want to make sure we're at least healthy enough as a company to deliver on that promise to our farmer customers as well as our tractor owner customers. So the biggest response for us has been really reducing costs. And then secondary to that is strengthening the digital elements of our business. Fortunately, we are a technology-based company. And so, leveraging tools like our applications that our farmers and booking agents use, the applications that our tractor owners use, is going to be key. But then also we've started to introduce things like WhatsApp and the automation of messaging through WhatsApp to reduce the reliance on in-person interactions, which obviously is going to be challenged because of social distancing policies. So we've been doing that, and then just removing the elements of our business that will put our customers at risk. So no more field demos, which is one of my favorite parts of the business. But none of that. But it's going to be challenging. I think it's going to be challenging for us. But we also have to keep in mind that as challenging as it is for Elo Tractor and our employees, it's going to be infinitely more challenging for that smallholder farmer that's relying on that harvest at the end of the season to feed their families and their broader community. And we have to be responsible to that community of people. And so our small sacrifices will hopefully translate over into real value to these farm families that need tractor services, that need to establish their crop on time to maximize their harvest at the end of the season.
So with the current restriction right now, is the government giving you guys a pass for tractors to go to the fields, or is it just total lockdown?
Yeah, so particularly, if you think about a country like Nigeria, there's even a lot of diversity in policy at the state level, where certain states are allowing for the free movement of agricultural equipment, farmers, to make sure those crops get established, and those local food systems aren't as disrupted as they would be if those restrictions were placed onto farmers and agriculturalists. And other states aren't as forward looking. So there's a lot of diversity. And we see that across the 13 countries that we operate in Africa. There's just a lot of inconsistencies in policies. And it makes it difficult because you can't have a universal response to this pandemic. You have to hyper localize your response because the conditions on the ground are going to be very different across these different markets.
African agriculture tends to be labor intensive. 50%
Yeah.
of the continent's yield can be attributed to lack of mechanization.
Mm-hmm.
How can mechanization feed the labor gap, especially in these times of social distancing, but also help reach the last mile of distribution channel?
Yeah, I think the entire hypothesis around Hello Tractor when we started the company 5 or 6 years ago was there is a real labor gap, power gap in these rural communities, and where human beings can't do work, machines oftentimes do a great job of filling that gap. And so we designed a platform to make machinery available in a reliable way to these small farmers. And the need for that has really been exacerbated since the pandemic has started and the related social distancing policies. The rural laborers, the migrant laborers have been further reduced, which means farmers don't have access to the labor that they need to cultivate the land that they have access to and plant on time. And so what we're trying to do to respond to that is take our existing fleet of 3,000 plus tractors, but also bring in new tractors. We're engaging actively with our dealer partners, trying to think creatively about financing, get them comfortable with releasing that in-country inventory to go into the market and service these farmers. Because at the end of the day, a tractor sitting on a dealer's lot isn't helping anybody. And these are very strange times. And we all have to step up to the plate and do what we can. And a part of that is going to be thinking creatively, but also making some sacrifices to make sure our farmers' needs get met. Because I think one of the things that maybe is not thought about enough is the sensitivity. If you think beyond just agriculture, beyond the needs of farmers, which is huge. I mean, that's 50% of the labor force. What happens when the price of food increases? We've seen the impact of just very small increases in food prices in 2008. We saw it in 2011. It's what prompted the Arab Spring, for Christ's sake. Early stages of a situation that can be far worse than that. You have real supply side constraints within the local food system, right? But then you also have countries are starting to pull back as a security measure their food exports. So countries in Africa that are reliant on imported food will see a lower amount of food coming in to supplement the food gap, the calorie gap in these countries. Compounding that situation even further is, we saw what oil prices did just last week with the May futures going negative. What happens when Nigeria doesn't have the hard currency to even buy the food? Because they earn their foreign exchange through selling oil, right? And nobody's buying oil right now, and there's a price war with the Saudis and the Russians and the US on oil. And so these things are all interrelated. And while it makes global headline news that the oil industry is under pressure, what happens in these local food systems that are also reliant on things like foreign exchange or earnings when oil gets sold and food imports because the local food system can't meet the demand? These are all very relevant topics that we need to be mindful of, because if we don't get in front of it, it can cause some very serious civil unrest and challenges that go beyond just having to stay home and watch Netflix more than you would like to.
So do you advise African countries to open their trade borders? I
think that should have happened. That should have happened decades ago, right? But
especially in this time.
Yeah, but definitely the free flow of food. Certain countries have a competitive advantage in certain areas. And in those scenarios, yes, these countries should be supporting neighboring countries and also exploiting that competitive advantage for the benefit of their local economies. But I think even more important than that is this is a time where we have to reevaluate the resiliency of these local food systems. And if as a policymaker now you don't see the importance of that, then shame on you, because these countries are in such a fragile state when it comes to feeding the populace and that over-reliance on imported food. And just having that base level of security can mitigate a lot of this risk. And so I think hopefully what this will signal to policymakers is now is the time to invest in agriculture in a serious way. Now is the time to support market systems and strengthen market systems and selectively apply subsidies and public funds to support these systems, strengthen these systems for longer term stability.
Thank you. Thank you for that. So talking about risk and challenges, East Africa is currently facing another challenge, the devastating locust outbreak. The locust threatening to destroy up to 80% of farmers' total harvest. The intensity of damage will grow unless urgent action is taken. How can mechanization help address immediate term solutions to mitigate disruption in our food system?
Yeah, well, I think it's two elements to that question. I think probably the most important and high impact approach to mitigate the risks associated with the desert locust is going to be aerial spraying, right? Where you're applying chemicals directed at swarms as you locate them, attacking the locusts at the larva stage, and that'll also have the smallest environmental impact. I think the challenge with that is it is by far, I think, the most high impact beneficial way to mitigate that risk. But who has the planes, right? Who has the drums and drums of chemicals to drop? And so what we've been exploring is, yes, we prioritize that. And yes, we do our part, whatever that practice is. But then on the ground, when it comes to spraying on the ground, what can we do to not only curate the right chemicals that can mitigate some of that risk when the swarms do come, but then also train our base of tractor contractors on the appropriate handling of these equipments and chemicals, the disposal of the chemical drums, because that's also a big issue, to mitigate the environmental impact of spraying on the ground. So that's what we're doing. We've been in open conversations with many of our partners, some of which manufacture the chemicals like a Bayer or Corteva, and then the spraying companies as well, those that make the boom sprayers, the 600 liter sprayers that go in the back of the tractors to spray the chemicals. And so it's those two approaches that we think some combination of those two approaches will help to at least mitigate some of that impact that you referenced in the question.
Thank you. And just to wrap it up, the last one, what do you think governments, development partners, and other stakeholders can do collectively to ensure these short-term crises do not feed off long-term problems, underinvestment, and food crisis post-COVID-19?
Well, I do wish there was more cohesion, not only in the local trade environment, as we kind of discussed earlier in the conversation, but globally, right? We've seen some of the largest producers of rice pull back, some of the largest producers of wheat pull back on their exports. And this is in an environment where global inventories of food have reached all-time highs, and food prices have reached all-time lows, right? But because everybody is in this holding pattern and being overly conservative about protecting their own interests, you can still see a situation where stocks of grain are sitting in silos, in the United States and Eastern Europe. Stocks of rice are sitting in silos in Asia, and people on the continent don't have the food that they need at a reasonable price to sustain themselves in social stability. And that's a shame, because there's no reason to have, grains just sitting somewhere not being consumed while others are in need. That's just poor coordination and just a lack of empathy. And I know geopolitics does not necessarily include things like empathy in the calculus, but shame on us if we let that happen. And I think it's up to policymakers and strong leaders to recognize that and get in front of it. And unfortunately, it seems we're at an all-time low in leadership when it comes to politicians. And so we'll see what happens. But there is enough food on this earth. Absolutely. And if there were a time for us to go through this, now would be the time, because we have so much inventory and prices are at very low levels. We just got to get it out to the people that need it. Yeah. So to learn more about Hello Tractor's COVID-19 and Desert Locust response strategy, please go to our website, www.hellotractor.com. Click on the link to learn more about our response to some of the challenges being faced by smallholder farmers across the continent. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jehiel. I appreciate it.
My pleasure,
Good
Wanda.
ones. Good points. Okay, then. Have a good one. Thank you so much.